The day I quit my job, the sky was a Photoshop shade of blue. Nate, are you absolutely sure about this? The woman from HR, Jessica, pushed her glasses up her nose. You know the annual bonuses are getting paid out next month. I tossed my corporate ID badge on her desk. To hell with a bonus. I'm moving to Asheville to open an inn. Heads popped up over cubicle walls like a row of prairie dogs. I knew what they were all thinking. Nate Rivers, the product manager who spent most of his time forwarding inappropriate memes, had finally lost his mind. Walking out of the skyscraper for the last time, I sent a text to my ex-girlfriend. I'm off to chase the dream. Want to come be the innkeeper's wife? The red exclamation point of a block number was the immediate reply. I flipped the bird of the New York City skyline and booked a one-way flight to Asheville. 3 months later, the slow lane was open for business. The name was the product of a moment of genius fueled by a local IPA. It wasn't much, 8 rooms and a rooftop patio covered in succulents. My days fell into a rhythm. I'd wake up whenever I wanted, wear flip-flops to the farmer's market for fresh biscuits, and spend my afternoons sunbathing in a lounge chair. At night, I'd drink with the guests and swap stories. This was how life was supposed to be, until that one rainy night, I was sprawled on a wicker chair on the rooftop trying to count the stars. I could only make out 3, but they were a hell of a lot brighter than anything you could see in the city. The clatter of high heels echoed up the staircase, each step sounding like it was going to punch a hole through my wooden stairs. Innkeeper, another bottle of that Stardust ale. The voice was as cold as a beer fresh from the cooler. I turned my head and saw a woman in a black dress, her long hair plastered to her face, lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth. Ma'am, I said, sitting up, you've already had 4. Afraid I won't pay. She pulled a wad of cash from her Gucci bag and slapped it on the table. This is probably enough to buy your whole rundown in. I raised an eyebrow. The woman radiated a don't touch me, I'm expensive vibe, but her eyes were red and puffy. She'd clearly been crying. All right, then, I said, getting up to grab the beer. But don't expect me to carry you downstairs when you're wasted. She let out a cold laugh with those skinny arms. As I opened the bottle for her, I noticed the faint tan line on the ring finger of her left hand. Ah, a rich woman nursing a broken heart. I took the hint and shut my mouth, sinking back into my chair and playing dead. The rain started up again, drumming a rhythm on the patio's awning. She chugged half the bottle in one go and then suddenly announced, "You men are all worthless pieces of crap." That's a hurtful generalization, I said without turning. The cockroach in my bathroom is male, and he's a perfect gentleman. She paused and actually chuckled. The smile vanished as quickly as it appeared, but I saw the dimple. Nate, I said, holding out a hand. Sophia, she replied, ignoring my hand and shoving her empty bottle toward me instead. Pool. As I poured, I took a good look at this Sophia. She was maybe 27, 28, with skin as pale and perfect as a cloud, sharply sculpted eyebrows, and a nose so straight you could ski down it. But her eyes were the real killer feature. Even when she was glaring, they looked like they were full of water. Seen enough? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Nope, I admitted honestly. You look like you should be the mascot for this place. What's that supposed to mean? You make people want to check in and never leave. She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth twitched up. We kept talking like that in fits and starts as she proceeded to drink every last beer I had in stock. By 2 o'clock in the morning, the rain had stopped. The stars were out, and she was completely drunk. Hey, she said, poking my cheek. Walk me to my room. Which room are you in? Don't remember, she said as if it were the most logical thing in the world. I sighed and helped her downstairs. She draped herself all over me, her expensive perfume mixing with the smell of stale beer. As we got to the second-floor landing, she suddenly shoved me against the wall. You're not bad looking, she slurred. Her eyes narrowed in evaluation. Thanks. It's a mountain water. She didn't reply to that. She just kissed me. Her lips were soft and cool with a bitter taste of hops. I froze for about 3 seconds before my instincts took over. It had, after all, been 3 months since I'd last touched a woman. When I woke up the next morning, the only thing left in my bed was a business card. Sophia Thorne, CEO, Thorne Industries. On the nightstand was a thick stack of cash, more than I make in a month from all the rooms combined. What the hell? I muttered, rubbing my temples. I just got paid for sex. I shoved the money in a drawer and threw the business card in the trash. A high-powered corporate queen and a small-town innkeeper. We were like a fine single malt whiskey and a cheap can of beer. Mix them together, and all you get is a nasty hangover. Life went back to normal. I went back to my lazy days of sunbathing, chatting up guests, and eating biscuits. Every now and then, the memory of that rainy night would surface, but it was quickly chased away by the arrival of a new pretty tourist. Until a Monday morning, 3 months later, I was in the kitchen frying up some local sausage when my receptionist, a college kid named Maya, came running in. "Nate, there's a woman in a Porsche here to see you." With a piece of sausage hanging out of my mouth, I walked out to the courtyard and saw Sophia Thorne. She was wearing a beige trench coat and heels that were completely impractical for my gravel path, looking as out of place as a peacock in a chicken coop. "Long time no see," I said after swallowing my breakfast. "Here to pay for the room you stayed in that night." She didn't smile. She pulled a piece of paper from her purse and slapped it on the reception desk. "I'm pregnant. It's yours." I nearly choked on my own spit. "Wait a second," I said, picking up the ultrasound photo from that one night. "Are you questioning my fidelity?" she asked, her eyes narrowing dangerously. No, not at all," I said, holding my hands up in surrender. "Just impressed. Your efficiency is on par with Amazon Prime." She ignored my terrible joke and walked over to the front desk, taking a seat. "I'm giving you 2 options. 1, I pay you $100,000 a month in child support. The child stays with me. 2, you marry me and join the Thorne family." My jaw dropped. The sunlight streamed through the window, catching the side of her face. I noticed for the first time the faint dark circles under her eyes. "Why is there an option 2? I asked cautiously. She turned her head, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "Because my father says an unwed mother is bad for the company's image. So the fake marriage? You can treat it as real if you want," she said with a cold smile. "It doesn't matter. I don't love you." I scratched my head. "Can I have 3 days to think about it?" "I need an answer now," she said, glancing at her watch. "I have a conference call about a merger at 10. I took a deep breath. $100,000 a month was tempting, but marrying into a dynasty sounded like the title of a trashy romance novel. Besides, I'd only met this woman twice, even if one of those meetings had been intimate. "I'll take option 2, I said, "but I have conditions." She raised an eyebrow. "First, the inn stays open, and I can come back to run it when I have time. Second, you can't tell me to stop making my off-color jokes. And third," I paused, "you have to tell me why you really came to Mayan that night." Her expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "The first condition is acceptable. The second depends on the situation. After the third," she stood up, "I'll tell you when I feel like it." And just like that, Nate Rivers, a former programmer and current innkeeper in Asheville, was inexplicably engaged to a corporate heiress. As I packed my bags, Maya looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Nate, are you being bought by a rich sugar mama?" I ruffled her hair. "Nope, I'm going to be a stud." The eye roll Sophia gave me was so intense, I thought she might sprain something. As the Porsche pulled away from the historic downtown, I took one last look at the sign for the slow lane-in. The sun was hitting it just right, making the letters gleam. "Having regrets?" Sophia asked. I shook my head, then remembered something. "By the way, does your dad know about me?" "He knows," she said, her eyes fixed on the road. "He said he wants to break your legs." My hand trembled as I buckled my seatbelt. "Does this marrying arrangement come with a life insurance policy?" She finally smiled, and that dimple made a reappearance. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll protect the father of my child." I couldn't tell if she was serious or joking, just like I had no idea where this absurd marriage was going to take me. But when I glanced over and saw her hands gripping the steering wheel, so tight her knuckles were white, I had a sudden feeling that maybe this volatile Koso wasn't quite as in control as she wanted everyone to believe. The car merged onto the highway, and I rolled down the window. The wind rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth from the mountains. "Hey," I said, "have you thought a name for the baby?" "It's only been 10 weeks, she said with a frown. "If it's a girl, How about Summerorn? That's terrible. Okay, how about Sophia Jr.? Shut up. Chapter 2. The Thorne family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was the first time I truly understood the phrase, poverty limits the imagination. Is this your house or a museum? I asked, dragging my suitcase into the foyer and staring up at a crystal chandelier that spanned 3 stories. I suspected the shiny bits on that thing alone were worth more than the entire historic district of Asheville. Sophia kicked off her heels. Shut up and follow the butler. The butler was a man in his 60s who looked at me like I was a cockroach that had wandered into a jewelry store. As he led me down a long hallway, I counted the oil paintings on the wall. 12 of them. I was pretty sure I'd seen prints of at least 3 in an art history textbook. Your room is at the end of the hall on the 2nd floor, the butler said stiffly. I'm not staying with Sophia. The corner of the butler's mouth twitched. Miss Thorne has her own private suite. Got it. Even a fake marriage had to follow certain ground rules. The room was luxurious, with a bed so soft it felt like sleeping on a cloud. I tested it out, then noticed a piece of paper on a nightstand. Rules of the Thorne residence. Rule number 1. No off-color jokes within the residence. Rule number 2. Breakfast is at 7 a.m., lunch at 1 p.m., dinner at 7 p.m. Punctuality is expected. Rule number 3. I skipped to the end. Rule number 28. Violation of any of the above rules will result in a deduction from your monthly allowance. I tossed the rules aside and dug a half-empty pack of cigarettes from the bottom of my suitcase. I barely lit it when the smoke alarm shrieked. 5 minutes later, Sophia kicked my door open. Are you trying to get yourself killed? I pointed at the cigarette. Stress relief. Quit, she said, snatching it from my fingers and stubbing it out. It's bad for the baby. The baby isn't even born yet, and you're already this strict. She narrowed her eyes. Nate, remember your role here. You are the father of my child, not some punk off the street. I held out my hands. All right, Miss Thorne, but I should warn you. The more you oppress the people, the more they'll want to revolt. She turned and left, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I'll lay on the bed, staring at the ornate plasterwork on the ceiling. Everything here was so refined, it was suffocating. I missed my inn. I missed its leaky awning and the stray cat that always pooped on my bed. The next morning, I was woken by a sharp knock on the door. A maid stood in the hallway. Breakfast is served at 7 o'clock. You have 20 minutes. I checked my phone. 6:40 a.m. I hadn't gotten up this early, even when I was grinding away in the corporate world in New York. The long dining table was laden with at least 10 different dishes. Sophia was already seated at the head, reading through a file. She was wearing a white pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, looking like a general about to go into battle. Morning, I said, pulling out a chair. She didn't look up. You're 3 minutes late. My watch says it's exactly 7. The Thorne household is set by the atomic clock in the kitchen. I almost spit out my milk. An atomic clock? Why not just sync up with NASA's mission control while they were at it? Breakfast ended in silence. As soon as she was done, Sophia left, leaving me alone with a table full of leftovers. The butler came over and asked what I wanted for lunch. I said whatever was fine, and he gave me a look that screamed, I knew it. I had nothing to do all morning, so I wandered around the gardens. The gardener saw me and got so nervous he nearly decapitated a prize-winning rose bush. I crouched down to help him prune some branches, and the old man started trembling. And Mr. Rivers, sir, this isn't appropriate. I used to grow succulents all the time back in Asheville, I said. As you see, succulents, they're the fat kids of the plant world. The gardener just stared at me blankly. I sighed. It seemed no one in the Thorne family had a sense of humor. Sophia didn't come home for lunch. The butler informed me she was at a board meeting. I was happy for the free time and ordered a burrito bowl to my room. The butler caught me red-handed, staring at my takeout container like it was a biohazard. Outside food is not permitted in the Thorne residence. Why not? Food safety cannot be guaranteed. I pointed to the logo on the container. It's Chipotle. It's practically a health food. His face was a mask of disapproval. The butler confiscated my lunch. I waited, starving, until dinner, but Sophia still didn't show up. By 10 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore and snuck into the kitchen to find something to eat. The refrigerator was stocked with gourmet ingredients, none of which could be eaten raw. I was contemplating how to open a jar of caviar when I heard footsteps behind me. Hungry, Sophia was leaning against the doorframe. She'd taken off her suit jacket, and the top 2 buttons of her silk blouse were undone. I noticed her face was pale, with dark smudges under her eyes. "You haven't eaten either?" I asked. She didn't answer. She walked straight to the fridge, pulled out a lemon, and took a bite out of it. Rind and all. I stared wide-eyed. "What kind of fresh hell is that?" "It helps with the nausea," she said, chewing mechanically, her throat working to swallow. It suddenly clicked. Morning sickness. She shot me a cold glare. "None of your business." I watched her defiant profile, and something inside me softened. I snatched the lemon out of her hand. "Go sit down. I'll make you some soup." "I don't need it." "Just shut up, Wonder Woman." I turned on the gas stove. The specialty of the house from the finest innkeeper in Asheville. Simple chicken broth with crackers. She looked like she wanted to argue, but another wave of nausea hit her, and she clamped a hand over her mouth and ran for the downstairs bathroom. As I listened to the sounds of her retching, it occurred to me that this untouchable CEO was just a regular person who got sick and felt miserable like everyone else. 20 minutes later, I brought a bowl of soup out to the living room. Sophia was curled up on the sofa, looking like a stray cat caught in the rain. I handed her the soup, and she took it, sipping it slowly. "How was the board meeting?" I asked. Her hand paused. "How'd you know?" "The butler told me." She put the bowl down. "Someone's trying to use my pregnancy as an excuse to take over my main project." "A man, right?" She raised an eyebrow. I smiled. "Just a guess." A bunch of old dinosaurs saying things like, "A pregnant woman should be at home resting." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she was surprised I'd figured it out. "You're coming to the office with me tomorrow," she said suddenly. "Huh? If you're going to be my husband, you need to show up where you're supposed to." I scratched my head. "But I don't know the first thing about business." "You don't need to," she said with a cold smile. "You just need to sit there and remind them that Sophia Thorne is not someone to be messed with." I looked at the fire reignited in her eyes and suddenly found her incredibly attractive. "Deal," I said with a grin. "But I'm going to need to buy a suit first." "It's already been ordered. It will be delivered tomorrow." Of course it was. A bossy CEO's efficiency was second to none. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, and I barely recognized myself. Sophia walked over and, without a word, started to tie my tie. She was so close I could smell the gardenia shampoo in her hair. "Don't move," she muttered, her fingers expertly looping the silk. I looked down at her focused expression and had the sudden urge to kiss her. The thought startled me, and I quickly looked away. "Done." She stepped back and looked me up and down. "You clean up nice." "Thanks for the compliment." I tugged at my collar. "This thing is choking me. Don't you high society types ever feel uncomfortable?" She ignored me and turned toward the garage. I followed behind her, wondering how even the back of her head could be so damn good-looking. Thorne Industries headquarters had a 50-story glass tower. In the elevator, Sophia suddenly grabbed my hand. "What's wrong?" I asked. She didn't answer, but her palm was sweaty. It dawned on me. "Are you nervous?" "Shut up," she hissed. I squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, I've got your back." She glared at me. "And what are you going to do?" I could tell some off-color jokes to lighten the mood. She rolled her eyes, but didn't let go of my hand. The moment the elevator doors opened, Sophia's entire demeanor changed. She walked out with her head held high, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a warrior's drumbeat. I followed a step behind, feeling the curious stares from all directions. The boardroom was already filled with about a dozen people. As we walked in, a bald man sneered. "Well, look who finally decided to show up. Enjoy your morning, Sophia." Sophia walked straight to the head of the table. "Let's begin." The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. I listened to them rambling on about market share, IPOs, and leverage buyouts, and I was so bored that I could hardly keep my eyes open. That was until the bald man spoke up again. "Give him his thorns." Delicate situation. I proposed that Vice President Zhang take over the leadership of the new energy project. I knew the Chinese term for new energy from file. I was instantly awake. Sophia's face was unreadable. "There's no need for that, Director Lee." My pregnancy hasn't affected my judgment, has it? The bald man, Lee, gave me a meaningful look. Then how do you explain canceling last night's strategy session because of nausea? A murmur went through the room. I finally understood. Sophia hadn't just skipped dinner last night. She had been so sick at the office that she'd had to cancel a critical meeting. Sophia's fingers trembled slightly. I stood up, walked over to the water cooler, poured a glass of lukewarm water, and placed it in front of her. "Director Lee," I said with a pleasant smile, "does your wife have any children?" Lee was taken aback. "What if she does? Then you'd know how miserable morning sickness can be. And if she doesn't?" I spread my hands. "Then you have absolutely no standing to comment." The room fell silent. Under the table, Sophia kicked my shin, but the corner of her mouth was turned up. "And who are you?" Lee sputtered, his face turning red. "Nate Rivers, Sophia's husband," I said, putting extra emphasis on the last word. "And by the way, your tie is crooked." The meeting ended on a sour note. Back in her office, Sophia shut the door and suddenly burst out laughing. "Not bad," she said. "Incredibly stupid, but not bad." I loosened my tie. "Those old guys are a real piece of work." "They're just the beginning," Sophia said, walking to the window. "Once I start showing, more of them will come out of the woodwork." Sunlight streamed through the glass, outlining her slender figure. On an impulse, I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her. She stiffened. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," I said, resting my chin on her shoulder. "I just wanted to hug you." To my surprise, she didn't push me away. We just stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of each other's breathing. "Nate," she said suddenly, "why did you choose option 2? "What 2? "The 2 choices I gave you that day." I thought about it. Maybe it was because of that kiss on the rooftop. She turned to look at me. "That's it." Also, I grinned. 100 grand a month is nice, but marrying into a dynasty sounded like a much better story. She stomped on my foot hard, but her eyes were smiling. On the way home that evening, the elevator in our building shuddered to a halt. We were plunged into darkness. Sophia's breathing became quick and shallow. Afraid of the dark, I asked, "Shut up." I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. Her face was pale, and she was clutching her purse strap in a white-knuckled grip. I took her hand. "It'll be okay. Just count to 10 with me." "That's childish." 1, 2, 3. She didn't count with me, but when I got to 10 and the elevator was still dead, she whispered, "Count again." I counted again. This time, when I hit 7, the lights flickered back on. Sophia immediately snatched her hand back and smoothed her hair as if her moment of vulnerability had never happened. But I knew in that small, dark space, for a brief moment, we had been real with each other. Before bed, I brought a glass of warm milk to her room. The butler said it helped with sleep. She was reading a file and immediately closed it when I came in. "For you," I said, putting the milk on her desk. She frowned. "I don't drink milk. It's good for the baby." "Drink it, Ms. Thorne," I said with a wink. "Otherwise, I'll have to feed it to you myself." She glared at me, but picked up the glass. When she finished, she had a little milk mustache. I reached out to wipe it away, but she flinched back. "Good night," I said, retracting my hand and heading for the door. "Nate," she suddenly called my name. I turned back. "Tomorrow," she hesitated. "Come with me to the doctor's appointment." I was surprised for a second, then broke into a wide grin. "Yes, ma'am. Whatever my wife says." A pillow flew at my head as I ducked out the door, lying in my own luxurious bed. I stared at the ceiling. 3 months ago, I was a carefree innkeeper in Asheville. Now, I was a dynasty's son-in-law and about to be a father. Life was sometimes more ridiculous than my worst jokes. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Maya back at the inn. "Nate, the Wi-Fi is down and the guests are freaking out." I texted back, "Get Dave from next door to help." The password is his daughter's birthday. Only after I sent it did I realize how far away that life already felt. Chapter 3. On the day of the ultrasound, Sophia wore a loose-fitting white sundress. I stared at her flat stomach for a long time, finding it impossible to believe a tiny person was living in there. "Keep staring and I'll start charging you," she said, buckling her seat belt without looking at me. I started the car. "Is there a discount for a monthly subscription?" She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth twitched upwards. Ever since the night I'd made her soup, her attitude toward me had subtly softened. Though on the surface, she still had that don't come near me force field up. The hospital's VIP wing was as quiet as a library. As the nurse led us into the ultrasound room, Sophia suddenly gripped my wrist. "What's wrong?" I asked. She let go. "Nothing." I realized then that her fingertips were ice cold. So, the fearless Sophia Thorne was scared of a doctor's appointment. The doctor was a kind, middle-aged woman. She had Sophia lie down and squeezed a clear cold gel on her stomach. Sophia winced, and I instinctively took her hand. "Cole," I whispered. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull her hand away either. The doctor moved the probe, and a blurry gray image appeared on the monitor. I stared, trying to make sense of it, when a rapid thump, thump, thump filled the room. "The baby's heartbeat is very strong," the doctor said with a smile. The sound was like a tiny drum, fast and loud. My nose started to tingle, and without any warning, a tear rolled down my cheek. "Shit," I muttered, wiping my face. "Is this machine leaking electricity or something?" Sophia looked at me surprised, and then she smiled. Not a smirk or a sneer, but a genuine, dimple-flashing smile. A sliver of sunlight broke through the blinds and landed on her eyelashes like a sprinkle of gold dust. The doctor handed us a printed photo from the ultrasound. I carefully tucked it into my wallet. Sophia pretended not to notice. "We're having lunch at the main house," she said as we left the hospital. "My father wants to meet you." I nearly tripped over my own feet. "We're doing the meet the parents thing already?" "It's just a formality," she said, her expression unreadable. "You are technically my husband." The Thorne family's main estate was even more ridiculous than the guest house they'd put me in. It was a compound with its own man-made lake. As we entered, the butler whispered to me, "Mr. Thorne does not appreciate wisecracks." "Perfect," I said, straightening my tie. "I'm a very serious person." 7 or 8 people were already seated in the dining room. At the head of the table sat an old man with a full head of silver hair and a gaze as sharp as an X-ray. I instantly understood where Sophia got her intimidating stare. It was genetic. "Dad," Sophia said softly. Mr. Thorne nodded, his eyes landing on me. "So this is the innkeeper." "Nate Rivers," I said, extending my hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thorne." He ignored my hand and pointed to a chair with his cane. "Sit." The meal felt like a doctoral dissertation defense. The Thorne family members took turns interrogating me, asking about everything from my family background to my education and income. They stopped just short of asking for a DNA sample from my great-great-grandparents. I answered honestly. I came from a rural background, worked as a programmer in New York, and now own a small inn in Asheville. "So, you're after my daughter's money?" the old man asked suddenly. The table fell silent. Sophia gripped her knife. I put down my fork. "Mr. Thorne, you're asking the wrong question." "Oh, you should be asking, is my daughter after his good looks?" I pointed to myself. "I mean, I'm not hard on the eyes." Under the table, Sophia stomped on my foot. "Hard." Mr. Thorne narrowed his eyes, then suddenly burst out laughing. "Interesting," he said, turning to Sophia. "Better than the last few boyfriends you brought home." I raised an eyebrow at Sophia, who looked furious. It seemed her romantic history was a mystery yet to be solved. After lunch, Mr. Thorne summoned me to his study alone. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, looking like a judge on the bench. "Nate, I've had you checked out," he said, getting straight to the point. "Your inn in Asheville does reasonably well, but compared to the Thorne family, it's a corner store." I shrugged. A corner store can have its own kind of happiness. My daughter needs someone who can help her run a corporation, not a laid-back innkeeper who tells crude jokes. I smiled. "Mr. Thorne, do you know what innkeepers are best at?" He raised an eyebrow. "Resolving conflicts," I said, gesturing toward the lake outside. "We're like water. It looks soft, but it can cut through stone. What Sophia needs right now isn't another businessman. She needs a glass of lemonade to help with her morning sickness." The old man stared at me for a long time. "There's an investment summit next week," he said. "Finally, you'll accompany her." I hadn't expected to pass the test that easily. As I was leaving the study, Mr. Thorne added one last thing. "Remember, the child may have the Thorne name, but you will always be a Rivers. Back in the living room, Sophia was talking to a glamorous woman. When the woman saw me, she covered her mouth theatrically. "So, this is your husband. He's much more handsome in person." "Aunt Carol," Sophia said coolly by way of introduction. "My father's third wife." Carol grabbed my hand warmly. "Nate, dear, Sophia can be a bit stubborn. You have to be patient with her. She was such a sweet child. You know, it's her father who spoiled her." Sophia suddenly gagged, covered her mouth, and ran for the restroom. I quickly followed, hearing Carol call after us. "Oh, the morning sickness is perfectly normal. When I was pregnant with Sophia's little brother, I was sick for 5 months straight." In a bathroom, Sophia was leaning over the sink, gasping for air. I handed her a paper towel. She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't say another word to her. She seems to like you. Last year, she tried to set me up with her nephew." Sophia sneered. "Now she's sucking up to you. All she wants is another vote on the board of directors." I was beginning to understand that the politics of the Thorne family were murkier than the French Broad River after a storm. On the way back, Sophia stared out the window the entire time. When we stopped at a red light, I reached over and gently brushed a stray hair from her face. She turned, her eyes wide like a startled deer. "What? You had something in your hair?" I lied. "Oh," she said, turning back to the window. But the tips of her ears had turned a telltale shade of red. On Monday morning, wearing another one of the three-piece suits Sophia had prepared for me, I went with her to the investment summit. The venue was filled with the rich and famous, and champagne towers were stacked higher than the Blue Ridge Mountains. "Stay with me and don't say anything stupid," Sophia whispered. I made a zipping motion across my lips. She glared at me, then turned to network. I stood off to the side, feeling like a decorative accessory. "You must be Ms. Thorne's partner." A slick-looking man with too much gel in his hair sidled up to me. "A pleasure." I shook his hand. "And you are Vice President Jang from Jang Properties," he said with a meaningful smile. "I hear you used to run in. That's quite the career change." I was about to come up with a sarcastic reply when I saw Sophia surrounded by a group of clients. Mr. Tsang's female assistant coincidentally handed her a cup of coffee. As soon as Sophia took it, her expression changed. She fought back a wave of nausea, a thin sheen of sweat breaking out on her forehead. I strode over, took the coffee from her hand, and drained it in one gulp. "Thanks, but my wife can't have caffeine. She's pregnant." The assistant stammered an apology. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Pregnancy isn't a contagious disease." "No need to broadcast it," I said, putting my arm around Sophia's waist. "If you'll excuse us, my wife needs some fresh air." Once we were out of the conference hall, Sophia threw up violently in the restroom. I crouched beside her, holding her long hair back, feeling her back tremble. "They did it on purpose," she said, catching her breath. "They know the smell of coffee makes me sick." "I figured," I said, handing her a bottle of water. "Is that Mr. Jang, one of Director Lee's cronies?" She looked at me, surprised. "How did you know?" "Innkeepers are experts at reading people," I said, wiping a drop of water from her chin. "So, are we going back in a fight, Miss Thorne?" She shook her head, a rare look of exhaustion on her face. "Take me home." That night, I was woken by a soft groan. I followed the sound to Sophia's room and found her curled up in bed, clutching her calf. "Leg cramp?" I asked. She nodded, biting her lip. I sat on the edge of the bed, lifted her leg onto my lap, and found a knotted muscle pressing down hard. Sophia gasped in pain and grabbed a pillow, her nails nearly tearing through the fabric. "Just breathe," I said, rubbing the muscle in firm circles. "We get guests with altitude sickness and cramps all the time at the inn. This trick works every time." Gradually, her tense muscles began to relax. I continued to massage her leg from her calf down to her ankle. Sophia had beautiful feet, slender and pale, with nails painted a soft pink. On a whim, I leaned down and kissed the top of her foot. She recoiled as if she'd been electrocuted. "You sorry professional habit," I lied smoothly. "At the inn, we always end a massage service with a kiss to signify completion." "That's the biggest load of crap I've ever heard," she said, pulling the covers up to her chin. I didn't argue. I just sat there on the edge of her bed watching her. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting shifting shadows on her face without the sharp edges of the day. She looked like a normal girl. "Nate," she said suddenly. "Yeah, why? Why are you being so nice to me?" I thought for a moment. "Maybe because you're carrying my kid." She threw a pillow at me. I caught it with a laugh, then noticed the glint of tears in her eyes. "Sophia." She turned her back to me. "Get out. I need to sleep." I closed the door softly behind me and stood in the hallway for a moment. My heart was pounding like I had just run a marathon. The next morning at breakfast, Sophia was back to her icy self, as if last night's vulnerability had never happened. The butler handed me a folder. "Miss Thorne asked me to give this to you." Inside was a thick file on Thorne Industries filled with dense data and project summaries. I looked up at Sophia, who was sipping her green smoothie elegantly. "If you're going to attend company events, you should at least try to look the part." "Yes, ma'am. Whatever my wife says." She didn't correct my use of wife, but the tips of her ears turned red again. That afternoon, Sophia went to the office for a meeting, and I sat in the garden trying to make sense of the files. My phone rang. It was Maya from the inn. "Nate, a pipe burst. The lobby is flooding." I rubbed my temples. "Call Dave. Dave's out of town. The guests are demanding refunds." I glanced at my watch and grabbed my car keys. Sophia should still be in her meeting. I shot her a quick text and sped toward Asheville. The inn was a disaster. The first-floor lobby looked like a water park attraction, and several angry guests were standing with their luggage demanding compensation. I rolled up my pants, grabbed a wrench, and crawled under the main water tank. 2 hours later, soaked to the bone and looking like a drowned rat, I finally fixed the pipe. "Nate," Maya timidly handed me my phone. Ms. Thorne called 8 times. I took the phone, and before I could even say hello, I heard Sophia's cold voice. "You had better have a very good explanation." "Vi's pipes." "I know." She cut me off. The butler told me I froze. "You had someone follow me." "It's called protection," she said, then paused. "Are you coming back for dinner?" Her tone sounded strangely like a wife waiting for her husband to come home. A warmth spread through my chest. "I am. I'll bring you some local cheese grits." "No, too greasy," she said and hung up. I smiled and shook my head, handing the phone back to Maya. As I turned, I caught my reflection in a window and saw a goofy grin plastered on my face. Crap, I think I was actually falling for the volatile CEO. On the drive back, a text from Sophia came through. Someone on the board leaked core data from the new energy project. Emergency meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't be late. Chapter 4. The air in the boardroom was as still and cold as a mountain lake in winter. I sat in a corner watching the numbers and charts flash across the projection screen. While I didn't understand the specifics, the looks on everyone's faces told me one thing. This was bad. The core data for the new energy project had been compromised. A competitor filed a patent application with our exact specs a week ahead of us. The head of Randy's voice was shaking. Our 3 years of research and investment might be worthless. Sophia sat at the head of the table, her fingers tapping a light, steady rhythm on the polished wood. She was wearing a loose black blazer, artfully concealing her small but growing baby bump. Only I knew that the rhythm of her tapping was just a fraction of a second too fast, a telltale sign of her extreme stress. What did the internal investigation find? Her voice was terrifyingly calm. The preliminary conclusion is corporate espionage, the head of security said, wiping sweat from his brow. The access log shows the data was downloaded last Wednesday in the middle of the night using your account, Ms. Thorne. The room erupted. Director Lee, the bald man, shot to his feet. Sophia, what do you have to say for yourself? It's one thing for your pregnancy to affect your work, but now you can't even manage your own account security. I clenched my fists, but a sharp look from Sophia stopped me. She rose slowly, her hands planted firmly on the table. First, my account has 2-factor authentication. It cannot be easily compromised. Second, I was at home resting last Wednesday. The estate security footage can prove that. Then, how do you explain the login? Lee sneered. Was it a ghost? It was a mole, Sophia said coldly. The room fell silent again. I noticed the head of R&D swallow hard while beads of sweat formed on Director Lee's shiny head. The board ultimately voted to form an investigative committee and, in the meantime, suspend Sophia's management of the new energy project. After the meeting, Sophia went straight to the restroom. I waited outside for 10 minutes before knocking anxiously. "Sophia, are you okay?" No response. I pushed the door open to find her leaning against the sink. Her face was as white as a sheet, her knuckles bloodless as she gripped the marble countertop. "Sophia." She looked up. I was shocked to see a single tear slide down her cheek. It was the first time I had ever seen her cry. "They won," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just because I'm pregnant, just because I'm a woman." I pulled her into a hug, feeling her whole body tremble. Her perfume mixed with a faint scent of stress, her hair brushing against my face. She reminded me of a stray cat I once found in Asheville, fiercely independent, but terrified and fragile when hurt. "Listen to me," I said, tilting her face up to mine. "We're going to fix this." "Ow!" She gave a bitter laugh. "You can't even read a balance sheet." "But I can read people," I said, wiping away her tear. "Back to your office. Tell me everything about this project." Sophia's office had a floor-to-ceiling window with a panoramic view of the city. She sank wearily onto the couch. I knelt in front of her and took off her heels. Her ankles were slightly swollen. I began to gently massage them as she explained the multi-billion-dollar new energy project. "So it's essentially a new type of battery technology," she said, rubbing her temples. "It could increase an electric vehicle's range by 40%. But now our competitor has all the data." I thought for a moment, remembering an incident at mine last year. The bar next door stole the recipe for my signature cocktail. "Do you know how I handled it?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "I immediately launched the knockoff special," I said with a grin. "Half the price with a new slogan. So good you'll think it's the original." All the customers came rushing back to me, curious to see if the copy was really better. Sophia's expression became thoughtful. "You're suggesting we voluntarily release some of the technology?" "No, we release a Trojan horse," I said, jumping to my feet. "Since they stole the data, let's play their game. We'll leak a revised version, one with a few critical errors mixed in. Let them waste their time and money heading in the wrong direction." A spark ignited in Sophia's eyes. She quickly opened her laptop and pulled up a data set. "Here. If we alter the ratio of the negative electromaterial by just 0.3%, exactly, let them build a bunch of batteries that spontaneously combust." She suddenly laughed, that rare dimple making an appearance. "Nate, you're a genius." "No, I'm just a sneaky innkeeper." For the next 48 hours, Sophia and I practically lived at the office. She worked with the tech team to alter the data, while I was in charge of ordering food and telling terrible jokes to keep morale up. At 3 a.m., when the final flawed parameter was set, the entire team cheered. Sophia collapsed in her chair. I walked over and started massaging her shoulders. Her muscles were as hard as rocks, but they gradually softened under my hands. "You're good at this," she murmured, her eyes closed. "My 5-star reviews in Asheville are 50% for the accommodations and 50% for my massage skills." She chuckled softly, then suddenly grabbed my hand. "Nate, thank you." Those 2 words, as light as a feather, sent a jolt through me. I leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Ms. Thorne, let's go home." She nodded, already too tired to open her eyes. I scooped her up into my arms and carried her out of the office, past the knowing smirks of her tech team. Sophia felt as light as a leaf in my arms. In the elevator, her head rested on my shoulder, her breathing even. I found myself wishing the ride would never end. The next afternoon, while Sophia was napping in her office, I snuck out to buy her favorite spicy ramen. When I returned, I heard voices from inside. "Ms. Vance, I really don't think now is the right time to discuss a partnership." Sophia's voice was ice cold. "On the contrary, Ms. Thorne, your company's crisis is the perfect opportunity for us to step in," a familiar female voice said, making my entire body go rigid. "I'm an expert in the new energy sector. I can help you mitigate your losses." I pushed the door open and saw Chloe, my ex-girlfriend, dressed in a sharp business suit, sitting elegantly across from Sophia. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. Nate. Sophia's gaze darted between me and Chloe, her face growing colder by the second. You two know each other? She asked. Chloe answered first. We were in college together. We were. She's my ex, I admitted bluntly. We broke up 3 years ago. Sophia's fingers started tapping on her desk at an alarming speed. Chloe, meanwhile, smiled and handed me a business card. I'm a consultant for Green Energy Tech now. It's a happy coincidence. I'm in the perfect position to help Ms. Thorne with her current predicament. I glanced at the card. Green Energy Tech, one of Thorne Industries' main competitors. What a coincidence. I sneered. Your company just stole our data, and now you're here to help. Chloe's face fell. Nate, what are you talking about? Exactly what I said. I placed the ramen in front of Sophia. Now, are you going to walk out on your own? Or do you want me to have security escort you? Chloe stood up indignantly. As she left, she shot a meaningful look at Sophia. You should get more rest, Ms. Thorne. Pregnancy can be so draining. The boardroom is no place for a delicate mother to be. Sophia shot up from her chair, but I pushed her gently back down. I yelled after Chloe's retreating back. By the way, your nose job is crooked. After the door slammed shut, Sophia shook my hand off her shoulder. Your ex-girlfriend? It was a college thing, I said, holding my hands up in surrender. I swear I had no idea she'd show up. Did she know you were working here? She knew I was running an inn in Asheville. A thought struck me. Wait, she just said, your company's crisis. The data leak was only announced internally this morning. How did she know about it so quickly? Sophia and I looked at each other, the same thought occurring to us at the same time. Director Lee, she said through gritted teeth. Before I could respond, Sophia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. It's my father. The voice on the other end was so loud, I could hear it from across the room. Get to the house now and bring that innkeeper with you. The atmosphere of the main house was even more tense than the last time. Mr. Thorne sat in his imposing armchair, a stack of newspapers spread out before him, all with headlines about the Thorne Industries data leak. Do you have any idea how much the stock has dropped? He bellowed. Sophia stood tall. Dad, we have a plan in place. What plan? One based on the half-baked ideas of this innkeeper. The old man sneered. I just got word that Green Energy Tech is about to hold a press conference. I couldn't help but interject. Mr. Thorne, that's exactly what we want. Shut up, he roared. Sophia, I'm giving you 2 choices. 1. Terminate the pregnancy immediately and focus all your energy on saving the company. 2. If you insist on having this child, then you will resign as CEO and stay home. The color drained from Sophia's face. I stepped forward. Mr. Thorne, that's not fair. Get out, he yelled, pointing at me. This is a Thorne family matter. Sophia suddenly grabbed my hand. Nate is my husband and the father of my child. He has every right to be here. The old man narrowed his eyes. So what is your choice? I choose neither, Sophia said, her voice trembling but firm. I will save my child, and I will save my company. And who do you think you are? Superwoman? Mr. Thorne slammed his hand on the table. Your mother was just as stubborn. She almost died in childbirth because of it. So, you want me to repeat her tragedy? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Dad, I'm not my mother, and Nate is not you. I am having this baby. Her father was shaking with rage. Fine, he spat. Let's see how long you last without the family support. On the drive back, Sophia stared silently out the window. I reached over and took her cold hand. We're going to win this. She didn't speak, but she squeezed my hand tightly. That night, Sophia came down with a low-grade fever. I sat by her bed, dabbing her forehead with a cool damp cloth. In the middle of the night, she woke up dazed and saw me still sitting there. What time is it? She asked, her voice weak. 3 o'clock in the morning, I said, feeling her forehead still warm. She shook her head, then said, Sing me a song. Huh, that Appalachian folk song. You were humming it the other day. She shifted over in the bed, making a little space for me. I lay down beside her and began to softly sing Wayfaring Stranger. Sophia rested her head on my chest, her breathing evening out. Moonlight streamed through the curtains, casting tiny shadows from her eyelashes onto her cheeks. I carefully put my arm around her, afraid to break the fragile peace of the moment. 3 days after the boardroom drama, Chloe Vance walked into Thorne Industries as a special consultant for green energy tech. She breathed just as I was massaging Sophia's temples. The long night spent setting the data trap had triggered a migraine that felt like a Blue Ridge thunderstorm inside her head. "Long time no see," Chloe said, her red lips curved like a blade. The rhinestones on her nails glittered under the projector's light. She used my old nickname deliberately, her eyes flicking to Sophia's back, which had gone rigid. Sophia's pen dug a long black scar across a memo. I gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze and turned a professional smile on Chloe. "Ms. Vance, I think you have the wrong conference room. The new energy team is on the 18th floor. I'm just here to drop this off," Chloe said, placing a USB drive on the table. The metallic link sounded like a gun being cocked. "Green Energy is willing to acquire your leak technology at 120% of the market rate. After all, it's secondhand goods at this point." Sophia let out a soft laugh. The sound sent a chill down my spine like the eerie silence of the wind chimes on Mayan's porch right before a lightning strike. "Tell Director Lee," Sophia said, nudging the USB drive with her pen, "that the mole he hired confessed last night." She clicked a button, and the projector flared to life, showing security footage of the bald man carrying a cardboard box out of the building. "And by the way, the thermal runaway parameters you received will cause your batteries to spontaneously combust at 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The color drained from Chloe's face. Sophia stood up, her loose blazer no longer able to hide the gentle curve of her stomach. The sight made Chloe's pupils constrict. She was finally noticing that Sophia was pregnant. "Oh, and one more thing," Sophia said, sliding an invitation across the table. "Our baby shower is next month. You simply must come, Ms. Vance." She stressed the word "our," her fingers unconsciously tracing the ring finger of her left hand where the faint tan line used to be. The second Chloe slammed the door behind her, Sophia doubled over with a dry heave. I rushed to hand her some water, but she grabbed my wrist instead. "Where's the ring?" "What ring?" "I noticed my wedding ring was gone from my jewelry box this morning," she said, her eyes shot with a feverish red. "Did you give it to her?" "It hit me. Then I knocked it off the desk yesterday when I was looking for that file. It must have rolled into the drawer." I fished the platinum band out of the crevice. She snatched it from my hand with enough force to leave crescent-shaped nail marks in my palm. That night, a security alert woke me from a dead sleep. The feed showed someone in the underground garage. It was Chloe splashing red paint on my car. The word "liar" dripped down the driver's side door like blood. Then a second camera feed lit up. Sophia, in a silk robe, stood in the shadows, gripping a golf club. By the time I sprinted downstairs, the paint was rolling next to the tire. Sophia had the head of the golf club tilted under Chloe's chin. The sash of her robe had come loose, revealing the faint purple love bite I'd left on her collarbone the night before. The scene was bizarre and erotic, like a poisonous flower blooming in the moonlight. "That photo you love so much. The one of the stars over the river that Nate sent you in 2018. I was the one who took it. He doesn't even know how to frame a shot, does he?" I froze. I hadn't even known Sophia in 2018, but she was right. That photo, Chloe's favorite, was one I paid a photographer friend to take. After Chloe fled, Sophia dropped the club and collapsed next to the car, vomiting violently. When I lifted her, I saw her bare feet were stained with paint and dotted with shards of glass from a broken bottle. She was trembling in my arms, but still staring in the direction Chloe had run. Her expression reminded me of a line from an old folk song. "Chasing a moonbeam you can see but never touch." Back in the bedroom, I found a cut on her foot as I was washing it. "Was it worth it?" I asked, dabbing it with antiseptic, getting this worked up over an ex. She suddenly grabbed the front of my shirt. "Do you know what she sent me today?" Her phone was pressed against my chest. On the screen was Chloe's latest Instagram story, a grid of 9 old photos of us. The last one was of her wearing my button-down shirt, captioned, 7 years means less than 7 months. I finally understood. That photo was taken during a rainy season in Asheville. The tattoo peeking out from under the shirt was actually a medicated patch for a shingles outbreak. But the explanation didn't matter. The emotion churning in Sophia's eyes was more terrifying than a storm over the mountains. "I'm going to buy out Green Energy Tech," she said, biting down on my collarbone. The pain mixing with a sharp thrill, and then in front of the entire company, "I'm going to make you scream my name just to prove who you belong to." The raw possessiveness of her kiss made the hair on my arms stand up. The lyrics of a song I used to hear in Asheville bars came to mind. Maybe love is waiting down by the river, but nobody ever mentioned that love might be a rose with thorns. The next morning, Sophia picked out my suit. Her fingers grazed over the tie rack before selecting one with a dark, subtle pattern, almost identical to one Chloe had given me years ago, but this one had the letters SW embroidered on the back. "SW, slave warrior," she said, her hands suddenly tightening the knot around my throat. My slave, my warrior. The comment made her stepmother Carol spill her coffee at the breakfast table. Sophia calmly spread blueberry jam on her toast. "Aunt Carol, wasn't your nephew looking for a position in the procurement department? I think a spot just opened up. He can start today." Carol went pale. Procurement was the department where Director Lee had been skimming money for years. I looked at Sophia's elegant profile as she ate, remembering an article I'd read about possessive personality types. Extreme possessiveness is often paired with meticulous calculation. She had laid the trap long ago and was just waiting for prey to walk into it. On the way to the office, the car radio played a familiar indie folk song. "By the River, You Were With Me." As the singer's raw voice filled the car, Sophia leaned over to adjust the air conditioning, her fingers accidentally brushing the inside of my thigh. "Focus on the road," she said, pulling back. A tiny smudge of blueberry jam was at the corner of her mouth. I leaned over and licked it off just as the car behind us laid on its horn. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw my own idiotic, satisfied grin. Crap, I was actually starting to enjoy this. At the negotiation table that afternoon, Chloe discovered that for every point she made, Sophia had a silent signal for me. A twirl of her pen meant counter that. A touch of her earlobe meant offer less. A bite of her lower lip meant go for the kill. When I dropped the final piece of evidence exactly as cued, Chloe finally broke. "You're cheating." "One of the fringe benefits of a strategic marriage," Sophia said, toying with her wedding ring, which was now firmly on her right ring finger. "It's like when your side uses seduction to steal data." She suddenly dropped the ring down the collar of my shirt. "Except my Nate only responds to me." The cold metal slid against my chest, and I nearly groaned in front of the opposing counsel. The public display was hotter than any bonfire. It burned Chloe so badly that when she stormed out, she snapped the heel off her shoe. At the celebratory dinner that night, Sophia had a rare half glass of champagne. On the way home, she hummed a soft tune, resting her cheek against my arm as I drove. While we were stopped at a red light, she asked, "Are the roses in the inn's courtyard still blooming?" My heart stuttered. Chloe had planted those. I tore them all out after we broke up and planted bluebells instead. "Gone for years," I said, squeezing the back of her neck. "It's all your favorite bluebells now." She was quiet for the rest of the ride. It wasn't until we were in the garage that she spoke again. "I sent someone to Asheville." Seeing my frozen expression, she gave a small, humorless laugh. "Don't worry, they're just shipping some of your old things from you in here. I'm going to get ugly in the last trimester. I'll need the smell of the mountains to make you stay." The grammatical slip revealed her insecurity. Stay, not stay with me. It was how she always used aggression to hide her vulnerability. As I carried her out of the car, the moonlight fell across her stomach where our child and all her unspoken fears resided. "Sophia," I said, pressing my forehead against hers, "you could be sick every day until you give birth, and you'd still be the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Her eyes grew misty, but she was still defiant. "Liar. You always liked Chloe's type." I silenced her with a kiss, tasting blueberries and the salt of her tears. I remember another line from that article. Beneath the extreme behavior of a possessive person is often a desperate need to be loved. Like the river needs the moon, even if its reflected light is as cold and sharp as a knife. Later that night, I was awakened by choked sobs. Sophia was curled in a lounge chair on the balcony, her phone screen glowing. She was looking at an old photo of Chloe, slim and carefree. I knelt and wrapped my arms around her. She struggled, biting my shoulder until I could taste blood. "I hate you," she sobbed, but her hands were clenched tightly onto my pajama shirt. "And I hate myself more for becoming this." Chapter 6. Sophia's high blood pressure diagnosis felt like a branding iron in the palm of my hand. The doctor pointed to the monitor. Systolic at 160, urine protein 3+. "It's preeclampsia." The medical jargon buzzed in my ears, finally settling into a single terrifying warning. "She needs to be admitted immediately. The risk to both mother and baby is severe." From her hospital room window, the city looked like a forest of steel. Sunlight shattered by the glass facades of skyscrapers fell across Sophia's pale face, and 4 drips of magnesium sulfate entered her left arm while her right hand furiously typed out an email. The tube swayed with every keystroke. "Ms. Thorne," I said, gently taking her laptop, "your only job right now is to play the part of the beautiful ailing patient, not the workaholic CEO." She glared up at me, the blood vessels in her eyes like a road map. "Give it back. The final bids for the new energy project are due today." "And then what? Let your blood pressure spike to 180 and pass out on a conference table?" I slid the laptop into my bag. "Do you know what the nurse just said? That pregnant lady is as stubborn as a mule." For a second, I thought she'd mistaken you for someone else. The corner of Sophia's mouth twitched, her telltale sign of a suppressed smile. Her hand went to her belly, where our 5-month-old child was now wired up to a host of monitoring machines. "Nate," she said suddenly. What I mean is if it comes to a choice. There is no if." I cut her off, raising the head of her bed. "Chicken soup or fish soup?" I had Maya from the inmate both and send them over. She stared at me for a few seconds, then grabbed a pillow and threw it at me. "Can you be serious for once in your life?" The pillow landed softly against my chest. I caught it and noticed a dark, damp spot on the pillowcase. She'd been crying again. The discovery made my throat tighten. "Listen," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her cold hand. "I already had the tech team release the doctor data according to our plan. Green Energy Tech is currently busy trying to develop a self-combusting battery. As for the final bid," I pulled a file from my bag. I was up all night reading through their materials. They overlooked one critical detail: rare earth mineral quotas. Sophia's eyes lit up. "Exactly. The CEO of the largest domestic supplier is a regular amine. He's already promised us priority allocation." I raised my eyebrows smugly. "I traded your husband's handsome face for it." Sophia finally laughed, her dimple making a brief appearance. "When did you learn to negotiate business deals?" "Haggling is an innkeeper's greatest skill," I said, tucking the blanket around her. "Just yesterday, a guest tried to pay his bill with a counterfeit 100. I spotted it immediately. Guess who he was? The assistant VP of finance at Green Energy Tech." Sophia's laughter was cut short by a knock on the door. Her stepmother, Carol, stood there holding a fruit basket, a strange man in a doctor's coat behind her. "Sophia, darling, this is Professor Liu, a specialist from Johns Hopkins," Carol announced brightly. "Your father had him flown in for consultation." I felt Sophia's fingers tighten around my hand. Professor Liu glanced at the monitors, flipped through her chart, and then delivered the sentence that froze the blood in my veins. "As per Mr. Thorne's instructions, if the situation deteriorates, our recommendation is to prioritize the mother." The room became so quiet, I could hear the drip of the 4. Sophia's nails dug into my palm, a sharp grounding pain. "That won't be necessary," I heard myself say. "My wife and my child are both going to be fine." Professor Liu pushed his glasses up his nose. "Mr. Rivers, medicine is not a game." "Then use my blood," I said, rolling up my sleeve. "Take as much as you need. Doesn't thinning the blood help lower pressure?" Carol gasped. Sophia yanked my arm. "Are you crazy?" "No," I whispered, leaning close to her ear. Remember that guest at the end with altitude sickness? Bloodletting is an old-school remedy, but works. We managed to send Professor Liu away, thoroughly exasperated. Before she left, Carol added ominously, "Your father is flying back tomorrow." As night fell, Sophia's blood pressure finally dropped to 150. I was massaging her swollen calves when the door opened again. This time it was Chloe holding a bouquet of aggressively blue hydrangeas. "I heard Ms. Thorne was in the hospital," she said, placing the flowers on the bedside table. The cloying scent of her perfume made me sneeze. I just had to come and see for myself. Sophia's expression turned to ice. "Your sources are impressive, Ms. Vance." "Oh, it's all over the industry," Chloe said with a look of feigned concern. "The rumor is that Thorne Industries is about to change leadership. A pregnant woman isn't really cut out for corporate warfare, is she?" Before I could say anything, Sophia put a hand on my arm. "Chloe, do you know why the blue hydrangea symbolizes heartlessness?" She stroked a petal gently. "It's because its color depends on the soil's pH. Blue and alkaline, pink and acidic, just like some people who change their tune depending on who they're talking to." Chloe's face fell. I had to suppress a laugh. Only Sophia could insult someone using a chemistry lesson. After Chloe left in a huff, Sophia was seized by a violent coughing fit. I hit the call button, then saw, to my horror, a fleck of blood in the tissue she was holding. The alarms on the monitors blared, and a team of doctors and nurses rushed in. I was pushed out into the hallway, watching through the glass as they worked frantically. Sophia's oxygen levels were dropping, her blood pressure was spiking again, and I heard someone shout to prep an operating room for a C-section. My legs felt like they were filled with lead, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Thorne. Rooftop now. The wind on the roof was sharp enough to cut. Mr. Thorne stood with his back to me, his silver hair like a cold fire in the moonlight. "My daughter has always been stubborn," he said without turning. "When she was 3, she had a high fever and refused to take her medicine. Ended up with pneumonia." I clenched my fists. "She'll get through this, too." He turned, his eyes as sharp as ever. "Do you know why I was against your marriage? It wasn't because you were poor. It was because you're too much like her mother, a romantic who mistook adventure for real life." I stared at him. It was the first time I'd ever heard anything about Sophia's mother. Her mother was 7 months pregnant with her and insisted on going mountain climbing. She had a placental abruption. The old man's voice grew thick. Sophia was delivered by emergency C-section. Her mother never made it off the operating table. The night suddenly felt impossibly cold. I finally understood the source of Sophia's relentless drive. It was the tragic, lifelong defiance of a child who had never known her mother. "I won't let her repeat that," I said. "But I won't take away her right to be a mother either." Mr. Thorne stared at me for a long, silent moment. "Do you love her?" he asked finally. The question hit me like a physical blow. Did I love her? From that first boozy kiss in the rain to the tear I saw when we heard our baby's heartbeat to the fierce way she defended me in her silk robe, my heart had known the answer for a long time. "Yes," I said, "like the mountains love the moon." He was silent for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "Get the helicopter ready. I want the specialist team from the Mayo Clinic here. Now." At 3 o'clock in the morning, after the new team's consultation, a new plan was in place. Blood purification to reduce the inflammatory markers. As the dialysis machine whirred to life, Sophia's blood pressure finally began to stabilize. I sat by her bed, dabbing her chapped lips with a wet cotton swab. Her eyelashes fluttered in her sleep like the wings of a wounded butterfly. Outside, the morning star began to rise. My phone screen lit up. A message from the New Energy team. Green Energy Tech has announced a suspension of their battery R&D. Stock has plummeted 60%. I gently took Sophia's hand. This was the hand that had signed billion-dollar contracts and left bloody bite marks on my shoulder. Now it lay quietly in mine, warm and fragile. "We warm, Thorne," I whispered. "You can rest now and just be a mom." On the monitor, the line tracing her vitals rose and fell in a steady, gentle rhythm like the calm, quiet waves of a mountain lake. As the clock in the delivery room ticked over to midnight. Sophia's nails carved 5 bloody grooves into the back of my hand. She was like a wounded panther. In the final half hour after her epidural wore off, she expanded her vocabulary of curses against me to include at least 6 new languages. When a baby's cry finally split the air, she collapsed onto the bed, drenched in sweat, and rasped, "Nate, if you ever get me pregnant again, never again, I promise," I said, kissing her damp forehead. "Our little Summer is perfect enough." A nurse placed the wrinkly, screaming infant on Sophia's chest, and she immediately began to cry harder than the baby. The corporate shark, who could eviscerate a rival in the boardroom, was now fumbling to support the 7-pound body of our daughter, her fingers trembling like the bluebells outside my inn. Through the glass, Thorne was openly weeping. Carol, his wife, seized the opportunity to hand him a handkerchief. The hallway was overflowing with flower arrangements from the board of directors, the most ostentatious of which was a solid gold pendant from Director Lee. Ever since our hostile takeover of Green Energy Tech, the man's sycophantic behavior had been enough to give me hives. Our suite at the Postpartum Recovery Center was more luxurious than the Thorne estate. I was woken in the middle of the night by crying and found Sophia standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding the baby. Her silhouette looked as thin and fragile as a piece of paper. The specter of postpartum depression was hovering, though she would die before admitting it. "Let me," I said, taking a wailing Summer from her arms. "The one needs a rest." Sophia shook her head stubbornly. "Why won't she stop crying? Probably takes after her mother." Born dramatic, I started humming an old Appalachian lullaby, holding the baby against my chest and swaying gently. The soothing techniques I perfected on stressed-out tourists at the inn worked their magic, and Summer's cries gradually subsided. Sophia stared at us, her gaze as soft as moonlight on water. "Where did you learn to do that?" "We had a volunteer at the inn who was a baby nurse," I said, placing the sleeping infant back in her bassinet. "She taught me to use the rhythm of your heartbeat to calm them down. It works on the same principle as de-escalating a guest who's angry about the Wi-Fi." Sophia suddenly grabbed the hem of my shirt. "The quarterly report is next week, and I have to be there," she said, biting her lip. "But Summer..." I looked at the dark circles under her eyes and remembered the doctor's warning to rest for at least 6 weeks. This woman was more worried about missing a board meeting than about her own physical recovery. "Sophia," I said, cupping her face in my hands, "do you know who the largest individual shareholder in Thorne Industries is right now?" Her eyes widened. After the takeover, 12% of the company's stock was legally in my name, all of which she had transferred to me during her pregnancy. "I'll go to the meeting tomorrow," I said, rubbing her hollowed cheeks with my thumb. "Your only job is to be a professional milk machine." She opened her mouth to argue, but I silenced her with a kiss. It was gentle and long, and I felt the tension slowly leave her body. While I pulled away, I tasted the salt of her tears. "Nate," she whispered, her forehead pressed against mine, "don't let them push you around." I grinned. The last person who tried to bully me is probably still picking gravel out of their teeth. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom wearing a custom suit Sophia had ordered for me. The chattering room fell silent. Director Lee's toupee looked like it was about to jump off his head in shock. "Good morning, everyone," I said, clicking open the presentation Sophia had prepared. "My wife wanted me to let you all know that if anyone gives me a hard time today, she'll be personally canceling their year-end bonus." A collective gasp went through the room. It was a total bluff, of course, but the effect was spectacular. The 3-hour presentation went off without a hitch until the head of R&D brought up the North American supply chain crisis. "Our Canadian supplier is demanding a 30% price hike or they'll cut us off," the CFO said, looking grim. "Our profit margins on the new EVs are already razor thin." "Find a new supplier," I said simply. The room buzzed with protests. Director Lee smirked. "Young man, do you have any idea how long the vetting process for a new supplier takes?" I pulled up a map on the screen. "There's a rare earth mineral processing plant in western North Carolina. They shut down 3 years ago due to environmental concerns, but last month they passed their new ISO certification. It was a piece of information I'd picked up from a guest at the inn. So what? The R&D head scoffed. The plant manager's daughter worked for me at the inn for 3 years, I said with a smile. Yesterday, he gave me a personal video tour of their production line. It's fully compliant, and their bid came in at 60% of what the Canadians are asking. The boardroom was dead silent. I was finally starting to understand what Sophia meant by business instincts. It was just the art of reading people magnified 100 times. After the meeting, Director Lee intercepted me. "Mr. Rivers, a personal request. My daughter is a huge admirer of your wife. She was wondering if she could get a photo with her." I clapped him on the shoulder. Maybe after Miss Thorne's maternity leave is over. The old fox changed his tune faster than the weather in the mountains. On the way back to the recovery center, I picked up a bouquet of bluebells. Sophia was nursing Summer, the afternoon light filtering through the curtains and bathing her in a soft glow like a Renaissance painting. I put the flowers in a vase by the bed. She looked up. "Did it go well?" "Nailed down a new supplier," I said with a proud grin, "and put the fear of God into the board." She chuckled, her dimple making an appearance. Such a show-off. I leaned down and kissed the top of her head, inhaling the sweet, milky scent of new motherhood. In her arms, Summer drank contentedly, her tiny fists clenching and unclenching as if conducting an orchestra. That night, I was woken by quiet sobs. Sophia was curled up on the couch, clutching a piece of paper. I went over and saw it was her postpartum checkup report. The diagnosis was a severe pelvic floor dysfunction with a recommendation for surgical intervention. "It's okay," I said, kneeling and wiping her tears. "I know an old woman in the mountains who has an herbal steam treatment for this." "I'm getting the surgery," she cut me off. "Next week." I was stunned. "But what about Summer?" "We'll switch to formula," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "The company is going public in the second half of the year. I can't be leaking every time I sneeze." The moonlight illuminated her stubborn profile, and in that moment, I saw the girl who had forcibly kissed me on a rainy rooftop. Time, like the tides, had pushed us from strangers to parents, but had never managed to erode the core of fierce pride within her. "Okay," I said, taking her hand. "But on one condition," she looked at me wearily. "You have to let me sing you a lullaby every night," I said, squeezing her fingertips just like I do for Summer. Sophia's eyes welled up with tears again. She threw herself into my arms, collapsing against me like a ship that had finally found its harbor. I held her, rocking her gently, and hummed a new improvised tune. "The bluebells bloom and bloom for a girl who's tough as stone."